Hello everyone! I came here quickly to make an announcement before the video is actually going to start. The following video is part 2 of a two-parter short series where I talk about Enhypen and andteam's lore featured in their comic series Dark Moon, available on Webtoon and Naver. Part 1, where I talk about the issues of Dark Moon and possible fixes to the story, is already out, and the link to it will be available in the description below. In this video, I will present the lore of Dark Moon for those of you who either need a refresh or do not wish to go to Webtoon and, watch 15 ads and read 15 episodes a day, as 2 of the free English translated comics are now locked behind a paywall. That way, when Enhypen or andteam will have their new comebacks, you can watch it and get to understand more of the lore present in it. You can watch these videos in any order you want, but if you have no idea about what the lore of Dark Moon is, be sure to watch this video first, then part 1. The style of these two videos is inspired by the style used by Unicorn of War, an amazing YouTube commenter who I highly suggest to go and watch. He makes amazing content despite being an underrated YouTuber. Go get that bag of money, bro. Before going further, I want to mention 2 key details. To make it easier to trace the character to the member and not get confused with whose name is who, I'll refer to the characters in this video by their member's name. This means Hyolai will become Hisung, Solon will become Sunghoon, Khan will become Kay, and so on. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we will reference only the Blood Altar, Grey City, and Children of Vamfield, as Blood of Vargar is now out in English and its events can be summarized with the information we received from the flashbacks in Blood Altar, and Witch of Yarasa and Two Moons are not out as of the making of this video. The last MV of Enhypen is no doubt in Daydream, while for andteam it is Yuki Akari and Deer Hunter. So, without further ado, let us start the lore. The story starts in the 16th century in a kingdom far away called Ashaha. This kingdom was guarded by the spirit of the wolf god Vargar and ruled by the royal family, who are known to possess shamanic magic. For decades, if not centuries, this allowed the coexistence of vampires and werewolves within the walls of the kingdom, something that was otherwise impossible. In its most recent times, the kingdom was ruled by a widowed queen who was also raising her only daughter, a little girl named Selene. Due to her responsibilities in ruling the kingdom, the queen assigned a playmate to Selene, the son of a noble family named Hisung. The two became close friends and over the years grew even closer. As time passed, the queen prepared Selene for her upcoming coronation, which would allow her to take over the kingdom. To ensure the princess's safety, a knight was chosen to be by her side at all times. Out of all the knights available and willing to serve the princess, even at the expense of their lives, 2 were considered. One was a very powerful knight with immense strength, but his arrogance was his greatest weakness, making him easily persuaded by evil forces. The other was not as skilled, but he was recognized by his unwavering loyalty and self-sacrifice for the greater good. The second knight, Hisung, was ultimately chosen to serve the princess and become her protector. While this was a great honor for Hisung, he also felt bad for the other knight whom he had once looked up to as a role model. Even though Hisung had surpassed him, he still held admiration for him. The royal family also hired several others as knights, sworn to protect the family from harm. Among them were Jay, a soldier from the neighboring kingdom of Rode, Jake, a knight from the kingdom of Kashal, Nikki, an officer from the palace, Sunghoon, the heir of the Glasto estate, along with his cousin Suno, and lastly Jungwon, a royal steward. The princess lived a peaceful childhood, learning everything that would help her when she would become queen, thanks to her tutor Marge, the royal librarian. However, despite her privileged life, Selene did not look forward to the strict traditions her mother was pushing her towards. One of the things she disliked the most was the idea of an arranged marriage. Selene believed that marriage should be for love, not for political or economic gain. She confided in Hisung, who was always by her side, offering moral support. He reassured her that everything would be okay and that she would marry a wonderful prince, though his words clearly hinted at his own feelings for her. When Selene was about to speak to her mother about rejecting the latest marriage proposal, she nearly fainted from exhaustion. Like her ancestors, Selene was born with shamanic magic, but hers were far stronger, making it difficult for her to control them. This often left her in a weakened state, suffering from frequent dizzy spells. A few hours after rejecting the proposal from the neighboring kingdom, Selene encountered Chancellor Dardan, who was pleased to hear that she had refused the marriage. Dardan was known for his obsessive crush on Selene and frequently pursued her, disregarding her clear rejections and personal boundaries. Assuming that her lack of affection towards him stemmed from his lower status as a non-royal, he became increasingly desperate. This time Dardan's obsession turned violent. He assaulted Selene, prompting her to slap him, and moments later, Heesung arrived and pushed Dardan away from her. After the altercation, Selene lost consciousness and was immediately taken to her bed, where the medics were called. Meanwhile, in a fit of rage, Dardan stormed into the royal library, searching for a way to increase his powers so he could win Selene. He even went as far as planning to take over the kingdom if it meant he could have her in the end. To achieve this, he sought one of the kingdom's most sacred possessions, the blood of the wolf god, Vargar. Just as he made this discovery, March entered the library and forced him to leave, as rumors of his suspicious behavior had already spread. Enraged, Dardan attacked March before fleeing, leading her to hide all the important documents to keep them from falling into the wrong hands. Back in Selene's bedroom, as she struggled with her shamanic powers, the queen realized that at this rate, Selene would not survive. Her powers were growing stronger with age, spiraling out of control. Desperate, the queen decided that the only thing that could save Selene was the blood of Vargar, which could help stabilize her powers. As Selene drank the blood, she had a vision of Vargar himself, who used his powers to aid her recovery. After this event, she no longer struggled with her abilities, and she became the first vampire lord to possess both shamanic powers and the power of the ancient wolf god. Unbeknown to them, Dardan had been spying on the event through the door. After everyone left, he drank the few remaining drops of Vargar's blood. However, because he only consumed a small amount, he became a low-tier vampire, cursed with an unquenchable thirst for blood and unable to face the sun without being burned. A year later, despite his initial setback, Dardan managed to build an army from the victims he had bitten. He also gained support from a group of renegade soldiers who harbored hatred for the kingdom's current ruler, seeking revenge. Among them was the former knight who had lost the opportunity to become Selene's protector. Dardan's plan to overthrow the kingdom became widespread, prompting the royal family to take precautions. To strengthen their forces, Selene's blood was used in a transfusion, turning the royal knights and March into vampire lords with special abilities, which was also shown in the flashback scene of Drunk Dazed. Additionally, Selene's extraordinary powers were sealed inside the blood altar, set to return to her once she completed her coronation. As battles broke out between the kingdom, supported by werewolves, and Dardan's army, the kingdom was outnumbered. Heesung faced the former knight who had turned against them and lost, vowing that the next time they will meet, he would not be defeated again. Meanwhile, Selene's mother fell gravely ill. On her deathbed, she urged Selene and March to go to the blood altar to complete the coronation so that Selene could inherit her full powers and protect the kingdom. At that moment, Dardan and his minions stormed the room, intending to kill everyone inside. March got gravely injured, and just as Dardan was about to strike Selene, he was ambushed by Heesung and the other knights. However, Dardan's powers allowed him to severely wound them. As he prepared to attack March once again, Selene teleported herself and March out of the castle. March begged Selene to complete the coronation, but Selene refused. She did not want to sacrifice everyone just to become queen. Instead, she made a final request. She planned to share her remaining powers with the knights, send them to the distant future, and asked March to watch over them until Selene's reincarnation, as she believed she would not survive the battle. As Dardan prepared to execute the fallen knights, Selene teleported back, confronting him. This gave Heesung the chance to stab Dardan from behind, and in retaliation, Dardan struck, but Selene jumped in front of the attack, taking a fatal blow. As she lay dying, she confessed her feelings for Heesung, hoping that in their next life they could be more honest with each other. With her final breath, she transferred the rest of her powers to Heesung and the knights, sending them into the distant future through a glowing wormhole. Inside the wormhole, Jake reveals their uncertainty about what awaits them, which can be heard in Outro, the wormhole from Border Carnival. The boys experience the journey as a nightmare, shown in the flashback scenes of fever, chased by darkness they cannot escape. This is followed by Intro Whiteout from Dimension Dilemma. The wormhole transports them to the 19th century, where Jake describes their destination as a magical island filled with challenges through. Before long, They experience amnesia like everyone else and are reborn as infants. Once they arrived in the 19th century, March found them scattered across different orphanages worldwide and gathered them in one place, Vamfield House. The year is 1840. The Vamfield orphanage was a place inhabited only by teachers, servants, observers, the director March, and 7 boys. To create the illusion that the boys were normal, March decided to turn some of the more important staff members into vampires. Just like in other depictions in media, vampires were labeled as immortal creatures, and the same applied to March and the 7 young boys. March also required the boys to take pills that stalled their growth so they could remain at the orphanage for as long as possible. Frequent checkups were conducted by the staff, who monitored the boys' teeth and recorded their progress in reports. This can be seen in Given and Taken Korean version when the boys are lined up for checkups. Thanks to the comfortable environment and the staff's devotion, the boys lived happily at the orphanage, in a similar fashion to that of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Over the years, several people arrived at Vamfield, making the boys' otherwise mundane lives more entertaining. However, as time passed, they noticed that several members of the normal staff, those they had grown close to, began showing signs of illness. Eventually, these staff members would leave their positions at the orphanage, and the boys would never see them again. Due to the orphanage's nature, the boys had no idea that these people were actually growing older while they themselves remained unchanged. 50 years passed. Yes, you heard it correct. 50 years have passed. Yet the boys remained young and energetic, unaware of how the world outside was changing. To keep them engaged, the orphanage slowly introduced new activities and items. One of these activities was woodblock carving, which piqued Suno's interest. He would spend hours in the orphanage's workshop creating as many pieces of art as possible. One day, Nikki and Jungwon took some of Suno's woodblocks and started a small fire in the garden to cook potatoes. Yes, this is actually the reason why. Which enraged Suno. As payback, he forced Nikki and Jungwon to carve wood for him so he could complete his greatest masterpiece. During the activity, Jungwon accidentally cut himself, leaving the boys in awe. A staff member noticed and immediately took Jungwon inside to be bandaged. That evening, the boys observed that their usual pills had changed, now accompanied by a liquid medicine. Suspicious, Jake decided not to take the pills. Later that night, he experienced an intense craving for blood, and he approached Jungwon and asked if he could bite his finger and drink his blood, eventually allowing Jungwon to do the same. March soon discovered that some of the boys were building an immunity to the pills, though in reality Jake and Jungwon had simply stopped taking them and had begun drinking blood. In response, she ordered an increase in their dosage. The next morning, while playing in the garden, Jake and Jungwon decided to play with the ball. Suddenly, as Jake threw the ball, it burst into flames midair. Jungwon, startled, dodged the fireball and in an instant teleported into a tree, shocking everyone present. Jungwon was taken to the infirmary, where he learned that he had healed unusually quickly from his previous injury. Concerned about the boys' safety during playtime, the staff decided they would now be under constant supervision. The increased monitoring and pressure to take the medicine made life at Vamfield feel more suffocating. The boys were forbidden from expressing their emotions, Jungwon was not allowed to run anymore, and Suno started displaying erratic behavior, a stark contrast from his usual sunshine personality, which is also kind of why in Given and Taken, Suno, the IRL Suno, acts very depressed. Like, this is, I think, the reason why. The boys' growing frustration eventually reached Heesung, who snapped at them, only to realize that they hadn't actually spoken out loud. Meanwhile, Sungkun and Jae attempted to relieve their stress through sparring, which led to a shocking revelation. Jae possessed immense strength, capable of breaking objects with ease and unintentionally harming those around him. Concerned, the staff added a tranquilizer to the boys' medication. They later described how the pills made their minds feel hazy. This can be seen with Heesung in Given and Taken Korean. Nikki, terrified of taking the pills, hesitated. Seeing this, Suno took Nikki's pills and swallowed them along with his own. The overdose made Suno sick, and in his rage, he demanded to know what the staff was forcing them to consume. That night, Suno experienced what seemed to be a lucid dream. a lucid dream. In this vision, he saw himself hanging upside down from the ceiling, watching as Sung-kun, covered in blood, was mesmerized by the full moon. To his shock, Sung-kun transformed into a werewolf. Dismissing it as a mere hallucination, Suno thought nothing of it. The next morning, the boys awoke in their room and Suno recounted his dream. Strangely, Sung-kun felt as if he had been physically beaten and even found marks on his hands. Meanwhile, the orphanage was in turmoil over the sudden deaths of several staff members, allegedly attacked by a wolf. The boys wished to attend the funeral, but were denied by every adult. Determined, Hee-sung and Jung-won went directly to March to ask for permission, but instead she punished them, locking them in a room until they learned to behave. While confined, they discovered a hidden passage inside their room, used by the staff to reach the lower levels of the orphanage. There, they uncovered experiment logs detailing their medication and dietary intake. Terrified, the boys began to suspect that they were being bred for a specific purpose. Choosing to remain silent about their discovery, they decided to stop consuming anything given to them by the staff, as their food was also drugged with the medicine. To their surprise, Jungwon and Hee-sung realized that despite not eating or drinking for days, they did not feel hungry or thirsty. They shared their findings with their brothers, and one by one, the boys stopped taking their medication. As a result, they gradually became sensitive to sunlight. As depicted in the flashback scene from Tame-Korean, one day, while playing outside, Nikki struggled to retrieve a bowl that had rolled out from under the shade of a tree. Meanwhile, March frequently left the orphanage for so-called business trips, which were actually extermination missions. Alongside her vampire staff members, she hunted down low-tier vampires that ventured too close to Vamfield. Years passed and the boys grew into teenagers. During this time, they learned more about their powers. Hee-sung could read minds, Jae could create fire, Jungwon had super speed, Jae had super strength, and Suno could stick to walls. Sung-kun, however, feared his abilities, as he was forced to transform into a wolf every full moon. It became a habit for him to isolate himself on those nights. Meanwhile, Nikki, the only one struggling to manifest his powers, felt increasingly disconnected from his brothers, feeling that they would leave him for being normal. Noticing Nikki's distress, Jake offered his blood just as he had done with Jungwon. This act awakened Nikki's shadow powers, which reacted to his emotions. Terrified, Nikki hid from his brothers, afraid they would see him as a monster. However, Sung-kun found him, recognized his fear, and helped him embrace his abilities. As the boys reunited, they secretly planned their escape, ensuring everything fell into place during one of Marge's business trips. However, they noticed Sung-kun becoming increasingly distant. He reassured them that he would not abandon them, but in truth, he feared escaping, as their plan coincided with the full moon, his transformation night. The night of their escape arrived, but Sung-kun was nowhere to be seen. Before they could search for him, they were ambushed by a wild wolf. Another wolf suddenly appeared, defending the boys and signaling them to run. As they fled into the forest, they stumbled upon the corpse of a staff member, triggering their bloodlust. They are startled when Marge appears, carrying an unconscious Sung-kun in her arms. Before Hee-sung can demand answers about the secrets she's been hiding, including her lie about going on a business trip, a distant cry for help echoes through the forest. They follow the sound and discover an injured man. At Marge's command, the Vamfield staff rush to his aid. Just before she departs, she tells Hee-sung she cannot reveal the truth. Not yet. Marge has spent years trying to keep the boys safe, withholding the truth about their identities and purpose. However, this secrecy has forced her to become more closed off than she ever intended. A few days pass, and the boys continue interacting with the outsider, who introduces himself as Müller, a traveling peddler who has gathered a wealth of knowledge from his journeys. When asked what he was doing near Vamfield, he explains that he got lost while fleeing from wolves and vampires. The boys, unfamiliar with the term, ask him what vampires are. Müller describes them as man-eating monsters that resemble humans. His words unsettle the boys, making them question whether they might be those very creatures. However, Müller reassures them, stating that vampires only attack at night and cannot enter well-built homes uninvited, drawing on the traditional lore surrounding them. Müller then shares a deeply personal story, revealing that he once had a family, a wife and children, who were brutally killed by vampires. After their deaths, he dedicated his life to hunting them down, determined to exterminate every last one. As Müller recovers over the next few days, he grows closer to the boys. However, his injuries have aggravated an old illness, leaving him confined to a wheelchair. Sung-kun became increasingly withdrawn, haunted by the thought of becoming a threat to others, just as the wild wolves had harmed Müller. Suno notices something strange. Despite Sung-kun's rapid healing, he decided to remain in the infirmary for 2 more days after returning from the forest. Concerned, Suno tries to check on him, only for Sung-kun to shove him away in a panic. Unwilling to let Suno see the wolf fur still clinging to his clothes from his transformation, the shove sends Suno crashing to the floor, cutting his arm badly, but to their shock, the wounds heal almost instantly. Müller witnessed the miraculous recovery. Suspicious, he is sent back to his room, where a flashback reveals his true intentions. He had indeed lost his family to vampires, but when confronted by them, he had been too afraid to fight back. Instead, he begged for his life, and in return, he was spared, turned into a minion, and given a mission: to locate a group of boys with special abilities and deliver them to Railgun, a former bar that has since become one of the many hideouts of vampires. In exchange, Müller was promised eternal life as a true vampire. Müller had first spotted March slaughtering a group of vampires, realizing she was protecting the very boys he had been ordered to find. As he attempted to get closer to the orphanage, he was attacked by wolves and low-rank vampires who mistook him for an enemy. That night, Müller sneaks out of the orphanage with a flare gun and ventures into the woods. He fires a signal to alert the vampires of his location, summoning them to attack Vamfield. March, who was already patrolling the forest with the staff, spots the flare and immediately senses the impending danger. The next day, the boys continue plotting their escape, growing increasingly suspicious when they realize Müller has disappeared. They question the Vamfield staff, but no one is willing to answer. Determined to find the truth, they set out to search the orphanage's hunting cabin, hidden deep in the woods. Upon reaching the cabin, they discover a horrifying sight: Müller, bloodied and beaten, surrounded by March and the Vamfield staff. Horrified, the boys attempt to free him, but before they can, the low-tier vampires arrive. In a desperate move, Müller betrays them, revealing their location to the vampires. In response, March shoves Müller into the horde. The vampires tear him apart, buying the boys just enough time to flee back to the orphanage. But as they escape, March realizes the truth. Her actions have turned the boys against her. Back at the orphanage, chaos erupts as the vampires break in. There goes that theory that basically vampires cannot enter well-built houses. The boys fight desperately to defend themselves. Realizing that the orphanage is no longer safe, they decide to flee. But Hee-sung suddenly collapses, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions and thoughts invading his mind. Meanwhile, Nikki, in a surge of instinct, unleashes his shadow powers, striking down a vampire before stabbing it through the heart. In the frenzy, his attack also lands on Marge, who had been trying to hold the creature back. As the boys regain control over their emotions, their abilities fully awaken, allowing them to wield their powers without restraint. In a decisive move, Jake sets the orphanage ablaze, ensuring that the vampires are trapped inside. Inside the burning orphanage, Marge watches as the boys disappear into the night. With sorrow in her eyes, she whispers an apology to the boys, to Selene, and to herself for failing to protect them the way she was meant to. As the flames consume Vamfield, the boys leave behind the only home they have ever known, which can be seen in Tame Dash Japanese version and the first quarter of Fatal Trouble. The boys start to wander through the woods, embracing their long-awaited freedom, yet unsure of what comes next. As revealed in Outro Cross the Line from Border Day 1 and Intro the Invitation from Border Carnival, although lost and afraid, they vow to stay together, because in this world, they can only trust each other. As shown in Let Me In from Border Day 1, they make several attempts to coexist with humans, only to face rejection time and time again. People fear them for what they are, deepening the boys' sense of isolation. Finally, as shown in Interlude Question from Dimension Dilemma, their journey leaves them questioning their place in the world, drifting without a purpose. A couple of years have passed. The year is 1920. The boys move into a grand mansion owned by a woman named Veronica, who agrees to hide them from the outside world. However, her relatives covet her wealth, and after a bitter dispute over her property, Veronica is poisoned. Why am I laughing? Upon her death, it is revealed that she secretly changed her will, leaving all her possessions to the boys. With nowhere else to go, they withdraw from society, isolating themselves within the mansion's walls. Over time, the solitude begins to take its toll. Hisung ceases to speak aloud, relying entirely on telepathic communication. Suno grows increasingly unstable. The once warm connection between the brothers starts to wither. Only Jake remains unaffected, watching in quiet horror as his family becomes distant, cold, and detached. Jake finds solace in an unexpected romance. He meets a girl named Barbara. Though their first encounter is less than ideal, she mistakes him for a goat thief. Over time, the misunderstanding fades, and the two grow close. Barbara believes Jake is the son of a wealthy man recovering from an illness that makes his hands perpetually cold. She fears that once he is healed, he will leave town forever. Hoping to make lasting memories with him, she invites Jake to the upcoming Halloween party. Meanwhile, a little girl named Sophie, running away from home, stumbles upon the boys' mansion. Initially, they try to send her away, fearing that their nature as vampires will put her in danger. However, Suno insists on letting her stay, commenting how the atmosphere of the group has warmed up since she arrived. Despite their reservations, the boys slowly begin to care for her, treating her like a younger sister, especially Suno and Sunghoon. Elsewhere, Barbara prepares to leave town to meet Jake, but crosses paths with Matthew, the sheriff's nephew and an employee at her family's salon. Matthew has been obsessed with Barbara since she was a child, relentlessly pursuing her despite her constant rejections, basically an alternate version of Darden and Solan. His desperation leads him to associate with the mafia, but after a failed deal, he is left with a broken leg, forcing him to walk with a cane. Barbara's family salon is also struggling. Liquor suppliers have raised their prices, making it difficult to keep the business afloat. One night, Matthew is approached with an opportunity. Someone is willing to pay a large sum of money if he can bring Sophie back. Unaware of the danger, Barbara meets Jake, who gives her a gift, a green bow. Touched by the gesture, she kisses him on the cheek before heading home. However, on her way back, Matthew, consumed by jealousy, assaults and accidentally kills her. To cover his tracks, he seeks help from his uncle, the sheriff. In the meantime, back at the mansion, Sophie would grow closer to the boys, in particular Sunghoon, whom she would start calling Mommy. Why did I sound so aggressive? Still, Sunghoon harbors doubts about whether keeping Sophie in the mansion is truly the right choice. Curious about how she found them, the boys ask Sophie about her past. She reveals that her father was taken by monsters. The boys initially suspect that Sophie's father may be dead, but she denies it. A couple days pass, and Sophie falls ill with a fever that does not respond to normal treatment. Fearing she may suffer the same fate as Veronica, the boys frantically search for a cure. Sunghoon sneaks into the town under the cover of night to investigate whether Sophie would be safer there. He discovers a house filled with blood-stained clothes. Before he can investigate further, Sophie's drunken father Hans returns home, forcing Sunghoon to quickly retreat. The next morning, Sophie confesses to Sunghoon that despite everything that has happened, she must protect her father because it was her mother's dying wish. Meanwhile, Hans is framed for the murders of both Barbara and the liquor supplier who has increased the prices. Matthew plants the green bow inside Hans's home, falsely claiming it was the one he gave Barbara when he proposed to her, when in reality, it was a gift from Jake. Jake grows suspicious when Barbara stops visiting him. Seeking answers, he visits her family's salon and learns of her murder. Heartbroken and enraged, he investigates further, discovering Hans's wrongful accusation. Hans, an immigrant and a doctor, was already resented by the townspeople, who saw him as an outsider. Instead of a proper trial, the town arranges a public execution under the guise of justice. Jake returns to the mansion and informs his brothers. They decide to rescue Hans before it's too late. Back in town, a wealthy customer named Anthony arrives at the sheriff's office. He notices a decline in alcohol's quality, but agrees to continue paying the same price. His real interest lies elsewhere. He seeks the missing girl Sophie and informs the sheriff that his subordinates will deal with Hans while he handles other matters. Meanwhile, Nikki, Jungwon, Hisung, and Jae infiltrate the hideout where Hans is held. There, they make a horrifying discovery. Anthony and his men are vampires, searching for Sophie for unknown reasons. A battle erupts, and the boys swiftly eliminate Hans's henchmen. In the chaos, Hans escapes in the woods. Unbeknown to them, Matthew witnesses everything. Convinced the boys stole Barbara from him, he swears revenge. At the mansion, Sungkun and Suno stay behind to watch over Sophie. That night, Sungkun shares a dream with her, one of his recurring nightmares. In it, his brothers discover his werewolf nature, trap him in a cage, and prepare to kill him. However, the dream shifts this time, revealing Sophie's own memories. She recalls conversations with her mother, who once told her that Hans hated seeing his daughter change. The scene morphs into a brutal reality. Hans, realizing Sophie's true nature, beats her and demands her she leave. When monsters attack, he has a change of heart and sacrifices himself to protect her, urging her to flee into the woods, where she transforms into a werewolf for the first time. The brothers return to the mansion, resolved to keep Sophie safe. Suddenly, a scream pierces the air. They rush outside to find Hans standing at the mansion's peak, holding Sophie over the edge. However, just as he is about to throw her, he hesitates, hallucinating. Sophie stops the brothers from killing him, reminding them that her mother would not have wanted that. In his final moments, Hans confesses that Sophie, as a half-werewolf, will soon lose control and begin killing instinctively. Realizing the pain he has caused, he lets go and jumps to his death. Hans's death sends Sophie into a deep depression. She refuses to eat, drink, or move, sleeping for days on end. Sungkun once again enters her dreams, where she has built an imaginary secret place where everyone, her parents and the boys, live together happily. She urges Sungkun to join her in his wolf form, realizing she will never be truly happy in the real world. Sungkun considers ending her suffering by killing her, but Suno stops him, unwilling to let her go. Meanwhile in town, Anthony learns of Hans's disappearance. Before he can act, Matthew tells him about Sophie's location, describing the boys who got her as abnormal. Heesung and Jake, who happen to be in town buying groceries, overhear the conversation. Anthony brings Matthew to the club, overhears all the information that Matthew has to offer him, but dismisses Matthew at the end, considering him simply drunk, and throws him into the dungeons, where low-tier vampires devour him. Before leaving the hideout, he sends a mysterious letter. That night, Jake, blinded by fury, goes along with Heesung to Anthony's hideout in secret and sets it ablaze, killing everyone inside in a fiery rampage. This event seems to parallel Lucifer from memorabilia. However, once the adrenaline fades, Jake sees himself as a monster and breaks down, until Sophie reassures him that he's not, and reminding him that creatures like them have to survive through other means, even if those means are sadly unholy. As time passes, Sophie becomes more feral, attacking animals at night and failing to recognize the boys. Unable to control her, they start locking her in the mansion's cellar. Suno desperately tries to bring her back, but she lashes out, nearly killing him one time. Seeing no other choice, Sungkun drives a blade through her back, ending her life. Suno does not blame him, but grief overtakes him. On the night of the town's Halloween party, he exacts revenge, using his powers to manipulate the townspeople into slaughtering each other. With nothing left for them in town, the boys leave once again. Before departing, Jake shares a heartfelt moment with Barbara's brother, who came to her grave to leave flowers. Years later, we learn the letter Anthony sent has reached its recipient, a powerful vampire who intends to reclaim the boys' mansion so it could be turned into another hideout for the vampires. After this event, we once again get another time skip. This time, 40 years have passed. It is now 1960, in the midst of the Cold War. The brothers have found refuge in Bashkmosha, choosing to no longer isolate themselves entirely from society. By day, they live seemingly normal lives, blending in with the humans. However, each of them secretly works as a fixer, using their unique skills in various fields. During the day, Heesung manages a bar called Vieski. Sorry if I butchered the name. Jay is a taxi driver, Jungwon is a doctor, Jake is a pilot, Sungkun owns a cafeteria, Suno is a hotel porter, and Nikki owns a toy store. During one of their fixer missions, the brothers rescue a man named Anton, who claims to be a reporter but suffers from severe amnesia. Suno takes it upon himself to take care of Anton and, much like with Sophie, grows deeply attached to him, treating him almost like a pet. However, Suno also repeatedly uses his powers to extract information from Anton. Whenever Anton starts to recall fragments of his past, Suno erases his memories again, leaving him trapped in an endless cycle of forgetting. The rest of the brothers remain wary of Anton, believing it is too dangerous to keep him close, given their history with humans. However, Anton eventually regains a crucial memory: he must save his sister. This revelation stirs something in Suno, reminding him of Sophie. Overcome with emotions, Suno insists on helping Anton despite the risks. One fateful day, Anton's memories return in full force when he witnesses a group of armed gangsters attacking two children. The boy is brutally killed before his eyes. From that moment on, Anton undergoes a drastic change. He becomes more reserved, secretive, and reluctant to share his true purpose. However, he confides in Suno and Hisung that he and his sister were once part of a covert spy training program known as the Cage. He reveals that he escaped the institution and posed as a reporter to gather information before returning to rescue his sister and fellow captives. Hisung refuses to assist him. Undeterred, Suno continues to help Anton in secret, monitoring his every move. Throughout their efforts, they uncover the existence of a new cage being built on the outskirts of Bashkmosha. Anton begins making calls to suspicious contacts, seeking allies. Eventually, he approaches the brothers again, asking for their help. All of them refuse except for Nikki, who was forced by Suno to help him. Despite their initial hesitation, the brothers are soon drawn into Anton's mission. A high-speed chase erupts as enemy vehicles pursue them throughout the city streets. The boys use their powers to destroy the pursuing cars, forcing Anton to acknowledge the weight of his actions. What happens next remains unclear. However, the aftermath suggests that the brothers were exposed as vampires, forcing them to flee Bashmosha. They eventually find themselves in a new city, where they are saved by a new girl named Chloe. By 1970, the boys have spent a decade hiding from the world. Chloe helps them seek refuge in an abandoned music shop where they remain secluded from society. Fearful of being discovered, they avoid leaving their hideout, an old and abandoned apartment. However, Chloe becomes their source of comfort, using music to bring them back together. Inspired by her, the brothers begin writing songs, some even dedicated to her. Chloe records them using a camera, storing the videos on cassette tapes. Over time, they amass hundreds of recordings. Among them, one song written by Sungkun stands out, Only If You Say Yes, with the alternate title, EXO. Years pass, and their love for Chloe keeps growing. They start to attack each other relentlessly out of pure jealousy for their love for her, and due to the fact that unlike other humans, she decided to remain faithful and loyal to them, showing to them the possibility of coexistence with humans. One day, the brothers watch the news on an old CRT television, only to be met with a devastating announcement. The town's population has vowed to exterminate all traces of vampires. Any hope for coexistence is officially shattered. With no choice but to flee once again, they set their sights on Riverfield. However, before leaving, Jungwon insists they must find Chloe and take her with them. He reminds his brothers that she is important to them all and that he made a promise to protect her and bring her to Riverfield as well. Sungkun agrees, assuming Chloe would be waiting at the music shop. As they make their way through town, they reach a police checkpoint. The officers, tasked with identifying vampires, quickly recognize them, but keep their composure. Without warning, gunfire erupts. The brothers attempt to escape, but crash their car into the music shop. Once the gunfire ceases, the brothers retaliate, taking down the police first. Despite their severe injuries, they are still alive. Sungkun searches the wreckage of the shop, only to find it completely destroyed. Chloe is nowhere to be found. Amidst the rubble, Sungkun finds the EXO tape and plays it inside the car's tape player. As Chloe's song fills the air, the realization sets in. They must leave without her. Their love for her, unspoken and unresolved, must remain a memory. Another 2 decades pass. It is now the late 90s. As we can see with Future Perfect, the brothers have reinvented themselves as powerful businessmen, living as wealthy CEOs and chaebols. Their company, Vesselsoft, manufactures airplanes resembling a corporation like Boeing. Despite their success, they cannot escape the lingering thoughts of Chloe. As reflected in No Doubt, moments of longing creep into their daily lives as they daydream about her, their love for her remaining undeniable yet forever out of reach. As the new millennium approaches, a grand celebration takes place at the company's headquarters. Outside the company, fireworks light up the night sky as the world ushers in the year 2000. However, beneath the surface, the brothers have already made their decision. They will erase their identities once again and disappear into the shadows. Then, in one final act of defiance, they destroy their own company headquarters, as depicted in Blessed Curse, obliterating every trace of their past. And just like that, they vanish once again. By this point, technology has advanced significantly, and the boys now find themselves in the digital age. As they travel towards Riverfield, something feels off. They begin experiencing strange flashbacks and deja vu-like sensations as if they've been here before. Their destination, being Daedalus Academy, holds answers to their past and the truth about who they really are. Despite their efforts to recall the person they keep seeing in their visions, they don't recognize her, as depicted by the lyrics of Fatal Trouble. It feels as though fate has led them here. Jake in particular is convinced that their purpose will be revealed in this place and that they will finally reconnect with someone they've been searching for all along. As shown in Foreshadow from Manifesto Day 1, once that happens, he believes they'll be bound together no matter what. Upon arriving in Riverfield, the boys decide to enroll at Daedalus Academy, a school where classes are held exclusively at night. Now, this is actually something different from the Webtoon and the Wattpad version, but we're going with the Webtoon version because it's easier to talk about this. But keep in mind that that's why I mentioned the classes being exclusive at night. This allows them to blend in more easily among humans while avoiding suspicion. Within a short period, they rise to become the stars of the school's sports team, using their powers sparingly but effectively, as shown in Sing-Korean, for example. That way, no one immediately assumes their true nature. However, a sense of unease lingers. As shown in the school scenes from Future Perfect, the boys can shake the feeling that they will soon be attacked again, just as they were before, this time by low-tier vampires, lurking in the shadows. Before we continue following our vampire boys, we need to take a short detour. This part of the story marks the beginning of Blood Altar, and since werewolves play a crucial role here, it's the perfect time to introduce Grey City. Grey City takes place a few years before the events of Blood Altar, during a time when cell phones were still common. Nicholas, EJ, and Taki, along with their caretaker, Jiri, played by Kentaro Sagakuchi in the MVs, moved to Greyville in search of a normal life, or at least something close to it. Nicholas and Taki are siblings who once lived in the same werewolf clan. However, after a vampire attack, they were forced to flee, leaving behind their wolf pack and parents. While on the run, they were discovered by Jiri, who took them in. As they travel the world, looking for ways to coexist with humans, they meet EJ, a struggling real estate agent who scammed them into buying a house that already belonged to someone else. Despite this, Jiri recognized that EJ wasn't truly bad, just desperate to survive in a harsh world. Seeing potential in him, Jiri invited EJ to join their pack, which he gladly accepted. Jiri, however, carries his own tragic past. He is the sole survivor of a former wolf pack he once shared with his brother. Back then, werewolves and vampires were in constant conflict, and in a desperate bid to survive, Jiri's brother betrayed their pack. He offered their people to the vampires in exchange for his and Jiri's safety. Overcome with raging grief, Jiri killed his own brother, though it did nothing to bring back the fallen. Ever since, Survivor's Guild has haunted him, driving him to protect every werewolf he meets, ensuring no one else suffers the way he did. Upon arriving in Greyville, the group found shelter at an inn run by Mary, an elderly woman, and her adopted son, Kay. Kay was quiet and withdrawn, a result of years of bullying. Because of his differences, people labeled him the devil, which affected his reputation in the town. Despite the rumors surrounding him, his mother still showed unconditional love for him. One of Kay's biggest tormentors was Croc, the son of a powerful businessman who controlled most of Greyville. Croc used his father's influence to blackmail others into submission, ensuring no one stood up to him. When Kay refused to join his gang, he was ostracized by the entire town. When Nicholas, Taki, and EJ learned of Kay's suffering, they stood up for him, forcing Croc and his gang to back off. They also befriended Kay, recognizing that he was just like them, an outcast. Initially, Kay feared that their friendship would bring them trouble, but after their constant reassurance, he finally let his guard down. At night, the boys would sneak away to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town, using it as a safe space to transform into wolves and train for future battles, especially if vampires would ever return. As time passed, Croc began to suspect that Nicholas and the others weren't humans. Once he realized they were dangerous, his confidence crumbled and the town turned against him, bullying him instead. His father, furious that Croc ruined his reputation, including his, during an important business deal, physically assaulted him. Meanwhile, the boys learned that the abandoned factory had been sold, so they decided to spend one last night there before finding a new hideout. But that night, Croc spied on them and caught them transforming into wolves on camera. Just as he was recording, Kay caught him lurking nearby. At the same time, Nicholas sensed something strange in the woods, a presence similar to a vampire, yet different. Rushing in alone, he encountered a silver wolf, stronger than any werewolf he had seen. Yet strangely, it neither smelled like a vampire nor a normal werewolf. Nicholas fought the silver wolf, but after a while, it backed away and disappeared into the forest. A few days later, Croc went missing, triggering a police investigation. Because of their history of conflict, Kay was labeled the main suspect and placed under arrest. The boys desperately searched for Croc, hoping he was alive, but Taki was the one who found him, sadly dead. When they examined the body, they discovered bite marks on his neck, proof that he was killed by a vampire. The panic had set in. The vampires had found them again. Jiri was devastated at the news, but relieved that Croc's corpse was discovered, clearing Kay's name. Around the same time, two new students transferred into Nicholas and EJ's class, Maki and Yuma. The boys immediately recognized their scent. They were werewolves. However, the official report on Croc's death was manipulated. Although he had vampire bite marks, the authorities claimed his body was too damaged to identify the cause of death and blamed the wild wolves instead. Behind the scenes, Croc's father struck a deal with vampires. He offered them the abandoned factory as a safe house, and the vampires revealed Croc's phone, which included the footage of Nicholas, EJ, and Taki transforming into wolves. Believing that the boys were responsible for his son's death, he lured them into a trap. He contacts the boys and informs them to come to the abandoned factory if they don't want the video of them transforming to go public. Despite knowing the risk, the boys choose to confront him. Inside the factory, they found themselves ambushed by Croc's father and his men, but just as things turned deadly, the silver wolf returned. It attacked Croc's father, who in a panic, accidentally shot his own henchman. The silver wolf destroyed Croc's phone, erasing the evidence of their true nature. As Croc's father fled, the boys were left wondering who was the mysterious silver wolf. Although Kay was released, he remained under police surveillance, forcing him to skip school and isolate himself. One night, the boys discovered the corpse of the officer assigned to follow Kay. The authorities arrested them as suspects. Jiri, sensing something was off, started to investigate on his own. His search led him to 3 rogue werewolves attacking indiscriminately. Though he tried to subdue rather than kill them, he was eventually assisted by Maki and Yuma. When he questioned them, they simply responded that this isn't the time for answers. Meanwhile, Jiri questioned Kay, who admitted to having blackouts, periods where he had no memory of his actions. Kay even suspected himself of being the killer of the police officer, stating that if he were guilty, he would willingly turn himself in. But Jiri refused to believe that. Then Kay revealed something shocking. He had seen Nicholas, Taki, and EJ transform into werewolves. Jiri immediately denied it. Later that night, the boys snuck out to uncover who was behind the town's recent murders, only to be ambushed by possessed humans with cold, dead red eyes. Forced into the abandoned factory, they came face to face with the vampires. It is revealed that the vampires had infiltrated Greyville to capture werewolves as test subjects. With Jiri and the Silver Wolf's help, a brutal battle broke out. The boys fought back, driving the vampires away. The Silver Wolf then reveals his true identity to the boys and Jiri, Kay. He expressed uncertainty regarding his true identity, but Jiri reassures him, welcoming him into the wolf pack. The vampires, retreating, killed Croc's father and reported back to their leader. They revealed that among the wolves they have discovered, one stood out, the Silver Wolf, a possible descendant of the very first wolf clan. After Kay grows closer to the boys and Jiri, he is contacted by Maki and Yuma, who reveal their true mission in Greyville. They came not just to observe the crimes that have taken place, but to rescue the 3 werewolves who had attacked Jiri earlier. Just like the humans, these werewolves had also been brainwashed by the vampires. However, Maki and Yuma decided to not trust Jiri completely with the details of their plan. They know what Jiri's brother did years ago, and because of that, they hesitate to rely on him fully. When they ask for the boys' help, the group does not immediately give an answer. Kay is conflicted. He fears that fighting the vampires will lead to all of them having to leave Greyville, something he is unwilling to do. He does not want to abandon Mary, the only family he has ever known. This causes a rift between him and the rest of the group, and K isolates himself from the others. During his alone time, his heightened sense of smell detects something alarming: a large army of vampires rapidly approaching Greyville from the mountains. As K realizes the incoming threat, the vampires arrive, launching a full-scale attack on the town. Terrified citizens flee for their lives, while Jiri, the boys, and Maki and Yuma step in to evacuate as many people as possible before preparing for battle. At the inn, the leader of the vampires finally reveals herself, bringing with her a possessed Mary. She does not attack K immediately. Instead, she speaks directly to him, trying to lure him out, awakening his buried memories. K suddenly remembers who he truly is. Long ago, K was a member of the very first clan of wolves. He was meant to become the leader of the clan at a young age, his coronation set to take place during the winter. However, the event was interrupted when the vampire leader invaded with her forces, sparking a bloody war between vampires and werewolves. The wolves lost. Amid the chaos, Kay's mother, though gravely injured, managed to flee with him into the frozen wilderness. She carried him as far as she could, but eventually her wounds and exhaustion overcame her. She collapsed in the snow, dying before Kay's eyes, leaving him alone and defenseless in the vast, freezing forest. That was when Mary found him. She took him in, raised him, and shielded him from the horrors of his past, never revealing what she knew about his true identity. As Kay recalls everything, the vampire leader smirks, and in a chilling display of power, orders Mary to slice her own neck. Kay erupts with fury, attempting to avenge his mother, but the vampire leader retreats before he can land a fatal blow. Mary, bleeding out in his arms, smiles weakly and tells him to never forget who he truly is, and that he will always be loved by her no matter what. She tells him to go to her room, and inside one of the drawers, find the necklace Kay was wearing when found by Mary. With those final words, she passes away. The grief-stricken Kay does as his mother wished, retrieves his necklace, and finally makes his choice. He joins the battle, standing alongside the werewolves. The werewolves' goal was to hold out until sunrise, knowing that the sun's light will weaken the vampires, as they were not strong enough to sustain themselves during daytime. At first, Kay fights with strategic precision, but his anger and grief consume him. He loses control, attacking more and more aggressively. At one point, he even attempts to kill the possessed werewolves, blinded by rage, only to be stopped by the others. Meanwhile, Jiri sustains a fatal blow but continues fighting alongside them. As the sun rises, the vampires begin to weaken and fade, including their leader, whose death breaks the brainwashing effect on both the humans and the free werewolves. As the boys prepare to celebrate their victory, Kay rushes to Jiri's side. With his final breath, Jiri tells Kay that he has no regrets regarding his passing and makes a final request: for Kay to take his place as the leader of the wolf pack. With that, Jiri dies, having fulfilled his lifelong mission of protecting werewolves. Days pass, and Kay retreats from everyone, once again unable to process his grief. He cannot accept Jiri's final request and isolates himself, mourning both Mary and Jiri's deaths. Meanwhile, the three formerly brainwashed werewolves, Fuma, Joe, and Haruwa, remain on the outskirts of town, avoiding the others. They feel unwelcome, uncertain of their place now that they are free. Nicholas, EJ, Taki, Maki, and Yuma attempt to bring Kay back, encouraging him on 2 separate occasions to return to them. Eventually, Kay agrees to meet them for a hangout at a restaurant, a chance to talk and heal. Before the meeting, Kay ventures out to the outskirts and approaches the 3 outcasted werewolves and asks them to join him and the other werewolves. Fuma, Joe, and Haruwa hesitate at first, but ultimately accept. At the restaurant, the boys finally gather together. Kay makes his decision. He accepts leadership and invites the others to form a new pack together. With their bond stronger than ever, the group leaves Greyville behind. The boys go to Yarasa, where the events from Dark Moon, the Witch of Yarasa, are about to take place. Afterwards, their next destination is Sunshine City, where they will attend school and begin a new chapter in their lives. It is the 21st century. The new school year begins at Dutchless Academy, an elite institution known for its strict security measures that keep students safe from outside threats, mainly vampires. Although classes have already started, a new transfer student arrives. Soha, a girl who specifically chose Daedalus because of its night classes. Upon her arrival, the teachers warn her about a recent murder caused by a vampire and advise her to stay within school grounds for her own safety. Soha assures them that she'll be careful. On her way to the dormitory, she has a brief but memorable encounter with a mysterious boy. Their exchange is short, but something about it lingers in the air. However, before she can dwell on it for too long, the boy excuses himself and disappears down the hallway. Once she is alone in her dorm room, Soha finally allows herself to celebrate. She has succeeded in getting admitted to Daedalus Academy, but for her, this is more than just a school. This is a mission. Soha comes from a small village, a place that never truly accepted her. Even though her parents were human, the villagers ostracized her, believing she was a vampire. With no friends and no place to belong, she lived in isolation. That's when she met Chris. Chris was different. He had a disability and, like Soha, was shunned by the village. But unlike the others, he welcomed her with open arms. When Soha feared that he too would abandon her, Chris simply smiled and said that he trusts her and that she can bite his neck for her to see that she isn't a vampire. Their bond grew stronger, bringing Soha the only warmth she had ever known. Until the day Chris was bitten by a real vampire. His death was blamed on Soha, the only one the village deemed capable of such a thing. From that moment on, hatred festered within her, and she vowed to eliminate every vampire she could. Part of the reason why she enlisted at Daedalus Academy was due to its vast library of forbidden knowledge that might just hold the answers she needs. While cleaning her room, Soha unknowingly reveals the very thing that makes people fear her, her super strength. At that moment, she notices someone watching her from the doorframe, the boy she had met earlier. Panic grips Soha and gets her scared he would avoid her now that the boy saw her inhuman strength. But the boy reassures her, telling her she shouldn't be able to study here if she were indeed a vampire. His words calm her, and for the first time in years, she feels a flicker of hope when the boy introduces himself as Heesung and asks Soha if they can be friends. Later, Heesung meets with the rest of his group, Jae, Sungkoon, Suno, and Jake, and tells them about Soha. He confesses that he feels strangely drawn to her, as if she is someone familiar. Jae and Sungkoon, however, warn him about the dangers of getting too close to humans, reminding him of their past with humans. But before the discussion can go any further, Soha finds them. The boys freeze, stunned at the sight of her. Then, without warning, their demeanor shifts entirely. They suddenly become overly friendly, as if nothing had happened. Well, except for Sungkoon, who remains distant, his tsundere tendencies kicking in. As time passes, the boys start showing Soha their own supernatural abilities, hoping to make her feel less alone in her strength. However, Jungwon, Nikki, and Sungkoon strongly oppose this, frustrated that the others are revealing too much. Ironically, the rest of the group realizes that Sungkoon himself has never disclosed what his ability is. It's the fact that he's a furry. One night, while taking out the trash, Soha encounters a group of strangers who have infiltrated the school. Assuming they are vampires, she immediately attacks, knocking one of them out. However, she quickly realizes her mistake that these aren't vampires. They introduce themselves as students from Sunshine City School: EJ, Nicholas, Taki, and Kay. Before Soha can process what just happened, Jungwon and Nikki arrive, ready to defend her. It is then that Kay reveals the truth of their arrival. The victim from the murder that occurred recently was a Sunshine City School student. Kay and his group came to find the ones responsible. Tension escalates, and just when a fight is about to break out, Soha intervenes, forcing both sides to stand out. Then Heesung arrives. Addressing Kay directly, he suggests they save their energy for the upcoming Night Ball match, a competition between their two schools. Soha begins to wonder if these two groups are enemies or simply rivals. Meanwhile, EJ secretly meets Sungkoon, recognizing him as a werewolf. Despite his curiosity, EJ chooses to keep Sungkoon's secret even from his own group. Initially, the vampire boys decide to distance themselves from Soha to keep her safe. But everything changes when Suno asks her out on a date in Riverfield during weekend. Suddenly, the rest of the boys insist on tagging along. Suno takes it a step further. He convinces Soha to meet earlier so they can have time alone before the others arrive. However, while Suno leaves to buy tickets for a boat ride, Soha is attacked by a low-tier vampire in an alleyway. Sensing danger, the boys rush to her aid. Jungwon, using his super speed, carries Soha to safety on a busy street. But before she can fully recover, she sees something. or rather, someone. Chris. Or at least, someone who looks just like him. Heart pounding, Soha runs after the figure, only to bump into Kay instead. Just then, the vampire boys arrive, and so does Kay's wolf pack. The air is thick with tension. Both sides urge Soha to choose who to trust, but she's deeply unsettled by the idea of taking sides. Before the confrontation can escalate further, Suno makes a bold move. He invites Soha to their birthday party. Hoping that this event might ease the growing tension, Soha convinces Suno to extend the invitation to the boys from Sunshine City School as well. With this fragile truce in place, the events come to an uneasy close. That night, Soha struggles to fall asleep. The sight of Chris standing before her, someone who is supposed to be dead, haunts her thoughts. She wonders if he could still be alive, and wonders why he never came to look for her, and why did he let her to believe that he was gone all of these years. As these questions torment her, a ray of light surrounds her. The next thing she knows, she's standing on a beach in Sunshine City. Looking around, her heart nearly stops when she sees Chris, wandering alone the shoreline, gazing at the sea. Soha runs to him, tears streaming down her face. She calls out his name, asking if he remembers her. Desperate, she reminds him of their childhood, how they grew up together, and how he once offered his neck to her to prove she wasn't a vampire. Chris turns to her, his expression unreadable. Then after a long pause, he finally speaks. "Of course I remember you." Before she can process his words, everything fades to black. Soha jolts awake in her dormitory, her breath shaky. It was just a dream. Or was it? Driven by desperation, she rushes to the beach, hoping to see him again. But when she arrives, Chris is nowhere to be found. Before she can process the harsh truth, the sound of howling wolves echoes across the shore. Her body stiffens as she sees a pack of wolves standing nearby. As she cautiously backs away, she bumps into someone. It's Kay. He looks different tonight. His usual neat hair is messier than usual, and his gaze carries something unfamiliar. Kay asks what she's doing at the beach so late. Not wanting to reveal the truth, Soha simply tells him she wanted to take a walk. She then notices something breathtaking. The moon is in the middle of an eclipse. Soha stares in awe at the celestial night. Kay, on the other hand, is staring at her. His expression softens, a faint blush appearing on his face. Without another word, he offers to take her home. I digress. The next morning, Soha visits the library where she runs into Heesung, who is returning a book on mythological creatures. She casually asks him about the lunar eclipse from the night before. Heesung explains that for werewolves, seeing a woman for the first time during a lunar eclipse binds them forever. That werewolf will love only her for the rest of his life. Oh my god, I hate this so much! A chill runs down Soha's spine, and so does to me, the narrator of this video, and so does to you probably, the audience. If y'all think about what I'm thinking, what the fuck? Heesung then asks why she's so curious about the eclipse. Hesitating for a moment, Soha finally tells him that she was at the beach and that she ran into Kay before heading home. Heesung's face goes pale, and so did mine as realization hits him. Before he can say anything, the rest of the vampire boys arrive at the library. A heated argument erupts between the vampires about who is superior between vampires and werewolves, escalating into an attempt to prove to Soha that vampires are better than werewolves by a margin. Frustrated, Soha suddenly shouts her hate for vampires. Silence fills the library. The boys freeze, their expressions shifting from shock to something else. Hurt. Realizing what she just said, Soha apologizes before quickly leaving, her heart heavy with guilt. Back in her dormitory, Soha finds herself confiding in Heesung. She finally tells him why she hates vampires so much. Because of Chris. Chris was her only friend when she was a child. She tells Heesung about their innocent games, about the day Chris asked her to bite him just to prove she wasn't a vampire, and finally she tells him about the day he died, killed by a vampire. Her voice shakes as she admits she could never trust a vampire after what they had done to her. Heesung listens quietly, his expression unreadable. Then after a moment, he takes a deep breath and steps closer, wanting Soha to bite his neck. Soha looks at him confused, but he explains that this is how much he trusts her. Soha stares at him, then asks if he would bite her neck. A flicker of hesitation flashes in Heesung's eyes. Fear. Soha mistakes it for discomfort and sighs, proving her point that it would be uncomfortable for both parties to do this. Before Heesung can say anything, he quickly changes the subject. He tells her that Suno's invitation was in fact real. The birthday party is an actual event. The boys don't know their real birthdays, so they choose to celebrate the day they left the orphanage together. Hearing this, Soha promises to attend. Back inside the boys' room, the rest of the boys are worried that Soha might hate them if she were to find out their true identities. The party takes place at a lavish mansion, one of the many properties the vampire boys received from their mysterious sponsors. The boys from Sunshine City School also attend, adding to the lively atmosphere. During the party, Kate tries to talk to Soha, but the vampire boys keep interfering, attempting to sabotage their interactions. Meanwhile, Soha presents her gift to the birthday boys, a vampire survival kit. This sends Taki, EJ, Nicholas, and Kay into fits of laughter, while the vampire boys stare at her in shock. When the vampire boys complain about not receiving a real gift from the werewolves, Kay steps forward handing a gift for Soha, a framed photo. The framed photo depicts 7 wolf puppies, with one of them being called out to represent Kay. This part is also shown in Drunk Dazed, and can also be referenced to some degree in Thief, who sounds very similar to Drunk Dazed. That's just a depiction. As the party winds down, Soha decides to leave with the Sunshine City boys, promising to meet Heesung the next day. However, as she was leaving, she suddenly realizes she left Kay's gift inside the mansion. Honestly, good thing you left the gift inside the boys' mansion, Soha. Make sure that gift stays there, and it's never brought back, because it just adds so many retcons, and it's a thing that I hate so much. Ignoring the warnings from the others, she rushes back inside. As she steps into the mansion, something feels off. The place was in ruins. She cautiously moves upstairs, only to find the vampire boys in a darkened room. They are feeding, not on humans, but on dead animals. Soha screams, terror flooding her veins. She turns to run. In a panic, Heesung reaches out to her with his telepathic abilities, but Soha pushes him out of her mind. She runs into the woods, but before she can get far, she's ambushed by a group of low-tier vampires. The vampire boys immediately sense the danger, and Heesung rushes to her rescue. When he arrives, he kills the attacking vampires and turns to Soha. But before he can explain anything, a new presence emerges. Chris. Soha's heart soars with relief. She runs towards him, but something feels off. Heesung sees it before she does. He pushes Soha away just as Chris attacks. At that moment, Chris starts to attack everyone, including the vampire boys and the werewolves who rush to Soha's rescue. And as Chris takes Soha away from them, that's when Soha realizes the truth. The real Chris would never do this. With his cover blown, Chris tries to bite Soha, but Sunkun suddenly steps in, with Chris biting him on the hand. As a result, Sunkun transforms into a werewolf and lunges at Chris, who, although surprised, is able to push him away. At that moment, the rest of the boys arrive. While Soha tries to escape, Chris attempts to slash her, but Heesung takes the hit instead, shielding her from harm. With Soha in his grasp, Heesung disappears into the woods, promising Soha he will tell her what is going on. Chris in the meantime smirks at the vampires. How disappointing. I expected better from you all, he taunts. Looks like none of you remember. Then in a flash of light, Chris vanishes so he can heal himself and get an army once again for the next attempt to attack Soha. Later, in the safety of the woods, Heesung finally tells Soha the truth. They are not like other vampires. They were born this way, immune to traditional vampire weaknesses, and they only drink blood once a year, and only from dead animals, refusing to harm the living. Soha feels ashamed. She realizes she was blinded by her longing to see Chris again. To prove her trust in Heesung, she lets him bite her neck, and for the first time, Heesung does. Their confession can also be described in Scream. Once Heesung receives confirmation that the enemy has vanished, he takes Soha back to the others. Still shaken but grateful, she thanks both the vampires and werewolves for saving her. She hopes that, now that they have worked together to protect her, they might finally set aside their differences. But instead of uniting them, their shared victory deepens the divide. With the Night Bowl match approaching, where they'll represent their respective schools, tensions resurface. Neither side is willing to back down. As the teams train for the match, Soha approaches Sunkun and asks to speak with him privately. Once alone, she thanks him, not just for saving her, but also for indirectly revealing his secret ability to transform into a werewolf to her. Sunkun hesitates before asking who was the guy who wanted to get Soha. Soha struggles to explain that it was supposed to be Chris. She recounts her history with him. Sunkun considers this, then suggests something unsettling. Maybe the guy that attacked Soha was just someone who looks like Chris. But Soha shakes her head. He knew things that only Chris would know, things that she had only shared with two people, Chris himself and Heesung. And then it hits her. There was one more time she had spoken about those secrets, in her dream. Sunkun's expression darkens. He asks her if she was sure that she was dreaming. A cold chill runs down Soha's spine. As a child, there was a rumor about her. Chris once told her that besides her superhuman strength, she also had a habit of sleepwalking. Her hands tremble as the realization sets in. She wasn't dreaming. Sunkun offers to walk Soha back to her dormitory. After she steps inside, he turns to leave, only to run into Kay and EJ. They're here to check on Soha too, but the moment Kay and Sunkun lock eyes, an argument breaks out. Knowing that Sunkun is a fellow werewolf, EJ immediately steps in, trying to de-escalate the situation. He reveals that the victim from Sunshine City School, the one that was killed by a vampire, bore an uncanny resemblance to Soha. Sunkun's face pales. Kay adds that several werewolves have also gone missing recently, and he strongly suspects low-tier vampires are responsible. Then he drops the final bombshell. He mentions how he needs to make sure Soha is safe. Sunkun demands to know why, and then Kay breaks down, saying he has feelings for her. Soha reacts to this from her room, revealing that she heard all the things the boy have said till now. At the end of the day, you were literally next to her door! The boys freeze. Kay goes to Soha's door and confirms what she suspected. Because he first laid eyes on her during a lunar eclipse, he will love her and only her for the rest of his life. Oh my god! Then he adds how he hopes she will cheer for Sunshine City School at the Night Bowl match, and how he will do the best to win for her. Sunkun doesn't have time to react to any of this before he is suddenly contacted by the vampire boys. They're in trouble. An old acquaintance has found them. Director March is inside their dormitory. Sunkun arrives at the vampire dormitory, where the boys are gathered before March, the very woman they escaped from over a century ago. 120 years to be exact, according to Heesung. He demands to know why she is here, and finally March reveals her original intentions to them. She explains that the Vamfield orphanage was created for a reason. She was given the responsibility of saving them, raising them, until the time was right. And now that time has come. She reveals the story of Darden, a powerful figure who once tried to seize control of the kingdom Ashana centuries ago. To protect the immense power he sought, it was transferred into the vampire boys who got sent into the future. That power had remained dormant until 17 years ago. The moment it awakened, so did something else. Princess ILAND, the one meant to wield this power, was reborn. Since then, low-tier vampires have been hunting her. That is how March found the boys again. She followed the presence of the reincarnated princess. And the boys now realize what she is saying. The princess is Soha. March can tell that they already know this information, and she insists that Soha must be hidden away for her own safety, to complete her coronation. But the boys refuse to hand Soha over. They don't trust March. Over the next few days, March repeatedly searches for Soha, trying to speak with her, but each time Heesung intercepts her, leading Soha away before she can be caught. Finally, the Nibel match is about to start. The werewolves and vampires take opposite sides of the stadium, and Soha is pressured to choose a side to cheer for, but she can't. The match begins, and both teams fight aggressively, determined to prove themselves to her. As the boys battle, they realize that their love for Soha is genuine, and consider the rarity of someone like her the equivalent of 1 in a billion. As the intensity rises, Marge appears beside Soha and asks her to talk to her outside the stadium. Hesitant but curious, Soha follows Marge. The moment they step outside the stadium, they are ambushed. An army of vampires attack, knocking them both unconscious. Back at the stadium, the game reaches its climax. The score is tied. Heesung is about to score the final goal when his eyes scan the crowd. And that's when he realizes Soha is gone. That split second of shocking revelation gives Kate just enough time to steal the ball. He shoots the final goal, securing victory for the werewolves. As his team celebrates, Kate turns to look for Soha, expecting to see her in the crowd. But she's nowhere to be found. Then the realization hits them. Soha is missing, and so is Marge. The werewolves quickly gather, stating that they will search for the rest of the members of their wolf pack first. 3 of them had gone searching for the vampires' hideout, and if they want to find Soha, they will need to locate them first. Meanwhile, the vampire boys make a different choice. They decide to return to the place it all started. If they want answers, there's only one place left to look: Vamfield House. The boys arrive at Vamfield House, only to find the orphanage rebuilt. Inside, they discover a suitcase, suggesting that Marge had plans to bring Soha there and then escaped with her. However, the suitcase remains untouched, meaning she never got the chance. Before they can investigate further, low-tier vampires emerge from the shadows, launching a sudden attack. As the boys fight back, they notice one vampire stealing a book from the library and leaving with it. After capturing one of the weaker vampires, Suno uses his mind control powers to extract information. The vampire confesses that their mission was to retrieve a book about the Blood Altar and deliver it to a bar called Railgun in Printemps. However, before the vampire can say more, he suddenly suffers a stroke and dies. With no other leads, the boys board a train to Printemps, determined to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, at the Blood Altar, an ancient fallen temple, the fake Chris, the one who kidnapped Soha, is revealed to be none other than Dardan. On the floor beside him, Soha lays unconscious, trapped under a spell that prevents her from waking up. Lining the walls of the chamber are cages filled with growling werewolves. All captives are Dardan. Dardan's plan is to steal the powers of the reincarnated princess while using the werewolves as test subjects, with his final goal being to become the strongest vampire lord in history. And with that power, he hopes to make Soha finally acknowledge him and love him. Back at Sunshine City School, the werewolf boys are unsure where to search for their missing members, Fuma, Haruwa, and Joe. Suddenly, Fuma stumbles into the dormitory, bruised and battered. He reveals that he, Haruwa, and Joe had infiltrated Railgun after hearing rumors that it was a vampire hideout. However, they were ambushed by a powerful vampire, and when Fuma woke up, he found himself trapped beneath the bar, surrounded by werewolves locked in cages. Joe and Haruwa were missing. Fuma warns the boys that vampires are experimenting on the werewolves and they must go to Railgun immediately to save all of them. As the vampire boys travel to Railgun, they each experience a mysterious dream. Soha appears before them, begging them to retrieve a special sword from a temple before coming to the Blood Altar to rescue her. Now, this is an interesting part because this next scene was shown in Future Perfect's Japanese version in its entirety. When they arrived at Railgun, the bar appears abandoned. However, after exploring deeper, they uncover a hidden staircase leading to a basement. There, they are met by a powerful female vampire, the one who attacked Fuma. She conjures a thick fog, which immediately weakens the boys' abilities and tries to put them to sleep. The boys try to escape, but vampires come rushing from the door they came from. As the boys struggle against the vampires' ambush, Soha's voice suddenly reaches them. Strange marks appear on their hands, granting them the strength to break free from the fog's effect. As they regain their powers, a low-tier vampire attempts to strike Nikki from behind, but Sunkun in his werewolf form leaps in and takes the enemy down. Nikki goes, "Solon," aka Sunkun's name, and that's pretty much it. In terms of, Sunkun revealing himself to be a werewolf to them. After so much build-up, the fog-wielding vampire, now furious, thickens the mist and stabs Hisung from behind. Though they manage to defeat her, there is no time to celebrate. Hisung lies on the ground, gravely wounded. That's when, in a flash of a golden light, his wounds heal instantly. When Hisung regains consciousness, he realizes the source of his miraculous recovery, Soha. Though trapped at the Blood Altar, she isn't fully unconscious and can sense when the boys are in danger. Using that little energy she has left, she heals and strengthens them. Before they leave Railgun, the boys capture another low-tier vampire who reveals their next destination, Autumnal. Shortly after, the werewolves arrive at Railgun only to find nothing but dead bodies and eerie silence. EJ deduces that the vampire boys must have already moved ahead. Fuma suggests that now that the fog-wielding vampire is dead, they should head to a storage facility near Railgun to free the captive werewolves. Although they had many imprisoned, Haruwa and Joe are nowhere to be seen. An older werewolf steps forward, revealing that Railgun was merely a midpoint. The rest of the captives, including Haruwa and Joe, were taken to Autumnal. Before they leave, the elder warns Kay that he is in great danger. Recognizing the symbol on Kay's necklace as the mark of the first wolf clan, the elder reveals a shocking truth. He knew about Kay's uncertainty whenever there was a full moon, as he was the only one from his wolf pack that would not transform during the full moon. This made Kay feel like something is wrong with him, and therefore incomplete. The elder reveals that Kay is not incomplete because he doesn't transform under the full moon. In fact, he was never meant to transform. Instead, he was born to lead. As such, he's a danger to Dardan, who may want to capture him. At the Blood Altar, Soha begins to experience flashbacks of her past life as Princess ILAND in the 16th century. She remembers her connection to Hisung and finally understands how the boys became vampires. The realization leaves her in tears as she is frozen. Darden notices this and taunts her, threatening to kill her friends and take all of her powers for himself. In order for the ritual to succeed, Soha has to be in the middle of the Blood Altar, where the full moon will shine above her and therefore allow her original powers to come back to her and give Darden the chance to steal them from her. The vampire boys finally arrive in Autumnal, only to uncover a horrifying truth. Every single citizen in the city is a vampire. Despite their unease, they make their way to City Hall, where they are greeted by Trisha, the mayor's secretary. She leads them to the mayor, who, to their surprise, is human. However, they soon realize that he is merely a puppet, intimidated by Trisha's status as a vampire. She brings the boys to the lower levels of City Hall, revealing a hidden temple where an ancient sword rests. Trisha tells Hisung that this blade once belonged to him centuries ago and urges him to claim it. Suspicious of a trap, the boys hesitate. That's when Trisha uses her powers to control Hisung, forcing him to grip the sword. Instantly, Hisung's memories from the 16th century return. With her powers over him growing stronger, Trisha commands Hisung to kill his own friends. Under her influence, he injures Suno, Sunghoon, and Jungwon, while also controlling Jae to knock out Nikki and Jake. But Trisha's control is limited, allowing Jungwon to break free and strike her down. At that moment, the werewolves arrive at Autumnal 2 and smell the vampire boys being inside the city hall. When they go to check out, they are met by Trisha's twin sister, Trina. Just as she prepared to lead them to the mayor as well, she heard her sister calling for her help. Trina then vanishes and summons an army of lower tier vampires to attack the werewolves, which are defeated easily. As the werewolves go to help the vampire boys, Taki claims that he can tell that Joe and Haruwa are trapped inside the city hall as well. Trina joins Trisha in battle, overwhelming the vampire boys. When Trina is about to kill Hisung, Kei rushes in to save him. However, Trisha turns the powers on Kei, giving her sister a chance to stab him and Nicholas. As the werewolves retreat with some of the wounded, Taki with Nikki, EJ with Sunkun, and Fuma with Nicholas and Jake, the door behind them closes shut. Trisha then orders Trina to take down the ones who are still not down yet. She takes down each of the remaining boys until Hisung remains. As Trina charges at Hisung, he suddenly sees Soha appearing behind Trina in a flash of light. With a single swift strike, Soha switches Hisung with the twin sister. Trina beheads Trisha, which causes both of them to die, as Trina became a vampire by getting bitten by her sister. All of a sudden, the fallen members of both groups get healed in a flash of light, just like it happened with Hisung. And they ask what is going on. Hisung realizes that Soha's powers allowed her to teleport through fog to save them, and that she is also the cause of them getting healed. She is constantly sharing her powers with them to save them. The two groups go to the mayor of Autumnal and find out that the Blood Altar is located in city center Hivernal. EJ also asks for the mayor to hand over the keys to the cages where the werewolves are being locked inside the city hall, which allow the werewolves to reunite with Haruwa and Joe. With Haruwa and Joe finally rescued, the teams prepare for the next and final battle, confronting Dardan at the Blood Altar. Despite their bad history, Hisung thanks the werewolves for saving them, vowing to meet again at the Blood Altar, where they will finally end the war and rescue Soha. Back at the Blood Altar, Dardan learns that in order to obtain Soha's full power, he needs both shamanic blood and werewolf blood. Determined to complete the ritual, he drinks Marge's blood and orders his followers to execute two missions. One group is sent to eliminate the vampire boys, while another is tasked with capturing Kei. Meanwhile, the vampire boys journey towards the Blood Altar. Just before they can arrive, they are ambushed by a group of powerful vampires, each possessing abilities that parallel their own. Suno battles a psychotic vampire with the ability to walk on trees and use mind control. Jay fights a vampire with super strength. Jungwon clashes with an enemy possessing super speed. Jake faces a vampire who can control water. Nikki struggles against a vampire who manipulates light. Sunken battles a vampire who has consumed so much werewolf blood that he has developed werewolf-like physiology. And Hisung fights himself against the traitor knight that he once idolized as a child once again. Initially, the vampire boys struggle against their opponents, unable to keep up with their overwhelming powers. However, in a final act of sacrifice, Soha grants them one last blessing, temporarily enhancing their strength and possibly making them invulnerable. With their newfound resilience, the boys overpower their foes and emerge victorious. But in the aftermath, they find themselves weakened and struggling to use their powers. Without Soha's continued aid, they begin to feel the full effects of their injuries. A sudden scream from the woods draws their attention, leading them to discover the defeated werewolves, who reveal that Kay has been taken, abducted by a vampire with lightning powers who was about to deliver him to Darden. Despite their exhaustion, the vampire boys carry the injured werewolves, who promise to launch an attack under the full moon using the night's power to their advantage. Jungwon realizes the urgency of their mission. They have to reach the blood altar before the full moon rises. At the blood altar, Kay remains unconscious, his mind drifting into a dream where he encounters Vogger, who tells him that he's stronger than he realizes, that he's not just a werewolf, but the moon meant to guide them all and serve the higher person. Upon waking, Kay launches an attack on Darden, attempting to rescue Soha, but he is quickly overpowered and locked away in a cellar. As the night falls, the vampire boys finally reach the blood altar, only to find a group of powerful vampires blocking their path. The werewolves, now recovered, step forward, offering to handle the battle so that the vampire boys can push forward and stop Darden. Inside, Darden claims that he has been waiting for them. As the ritual begins, it drains the remaining power from the vampire boys, turning their hair white as their vampire abilities fade away. Despite this, Heesung still charges at Darden, while Seunghoon, despite losing his vampire abilities, transforms into his werewolf form and takes on the lightning-wielding vampire. As Darden prepares to strike down Heesung, the werewolves burst into the blood altar, launching a ferocious attack against him. Meanwhile, Heesung reaches Soha and confesses his love to her. The confession awakens her, and she reciprocates his feelings just before Darden throws Heesung into the water. Soha desperately tries to reach him, but the ritual keeps her confined within the altar. Furious, she grabs Heesung's sword and attempts to strike Darden down, but he overpowers her, forcing her to drop the weapon into the water. Darden taunts Soha, revealing the depth of his obsession, vowing to steal her powers no matter what. When Soha retorts that she would rather die than to be his, Darden cruelly responds that no matter how many times she reincarnates, he will always find her, even revealing that Chris's death was his doing. This enrages Soha, and in her fury, she lands a powerful punch to Darden's face. However, before she can strike again, Heesung, having emerged from the water, begins freeing the captured werewolves, including Kay, who immediately charges at Darden. Enraged, Darden casts a spell that blocks the moonlight, forcing the werewolves to revert to their human forms, all except Kay, who remains transformed. Darden attempts to bend Kay and Heesung to his will, demanding they pledge loyalty to him or he will kill Soha. When they refuse, he turns to the vampire boys, threatening Heesung's life in exchange for their servitude. Before they can respond, Darden pushes Heesung off the edge, sending him plummeting to his death. Nikki, despite being blind and powerless, refuses to let this happen. As he falls, Nikki suddenly taps into his true power, realizing that shadows have always been a part of him. With this realization, his abilities return, allowing him to rescue Heesung just in time. As Heesung recovers, he experiences a sudden revelation, realizing that the vampire boys used to possess two sets of powers, the abilities granted by Selan before sending them to the future, and their natural vampire lord abilities obtained through their blood transfusion. With this understanding, Heesung awakens his telepathic abilities, using them to restore the memories of his brothers. As their past with Selan is unveiled, the vampire boys reclaim their true powers. At the same time, Kay finally understands Varger's words, realizing that as the moon of the werewolves, his duty is to lead them to their destiny. Channeling his newfound power, he lets out a magical howl, triggering a mass transformation, allowing all werewolves to instantly shift into their wolf forms. Together, they annihilate Darden's vampire forces. Darden attempts to launch one final attack on Kay, but Jay intervenes, pummeling him mercilessly. Defeated, Darden makes one last move, collapsing the blood altar, intending to take everyone down with him. After the structure crumbles, Darden tries to strike down Heesung, but Soha steps in front of him, taking the fatal blow. With her dying breath, she tells Heesung that this will be their final life together, urging him to cherish their time honestly. In the final act, Soha unleashes her true form, what seems to be a fusion between herself and her past self, Selan, and channels the remaining power of the blood altar to fatally stab Darden with Heesung's sword. As the vampire lord succumbs to his injuries, he admits defeat, finally collapsing. With Darden gone, Soha reunites with Heesung and the others, deciding to continue her life as a student at Dechelis. Time passes, and Soha moves into a new dormitory, finally able to enjoy a peaceful life. She spends more time with the vampire boys, who have since mended their strained relationship with the werewolves. One day in October, she joins the boys in celebrating Kei's birthday. During the celebration, Kei confesses that his feelings for Soha remain strong, but that her happiness matters more to him than his own. I hate this so much. It's such a half-assed method to be like, oh, okay, we're basically retracting the fact that we just made this man fall in love with someone for the rest of their lives. Like, with the battle over and the past laid to rest, their new story begins. No, literally, their new story begins. Months pass, and winter descends upon them. Although the vampire brothers are grateful to be reunited with Soha, a growing unease festers among them. Even after all this time, they still crave blood, and the feral urges that come with it terrify them. They fear that if they ever lose control, they might accidentally harm Soha. Determined to end their suffering, the brothers come to a painful decision. They want to relinquish their vampire powers completely and return them to Soha. But one among them stands against this choice. Sunkun refuses. He wants to keep the group together, afraid of what might happen if Soha actually goes through with their plan. He is also worried that asking Soha to bite them all and take back their powers might also burden her with guilt, forcing her to live with the weight of their deaths. Because of this, he distances himself from his brothers, who now view him as a traitor for stopping Soha from saving them. Sunkun hides Soha away, keeping her from the others. Soha, fully aware of everything, begins to sink into sadness, blaming herself for their division. Meanwhile, the rest of the brothers wrestle with their growing hunger, experiencing an intense desire for Soha to bite their necks and set them free from what they now perceive as a curse. Their longing is both physical and emotional, an agony that only she can end. Determined to protect Soha, Sunkun faces off against his brothers, first against Jongwon, then Nikki. Though he fights with all his strength, he is eventually defeated. Soha runs away into the woods when she stumbles into Jae. To her surprise, Jake does not attack. Instead, he stands motionless, his blank expression betraying no emotion. Looking into his eyes, Soha realizes the truth. They're all suffering immensely. And that's when it finally becomes clear to her. This is the only way she can save them. This is the only way she can save them all. Soha steps forward and bites Jae's neck. The moment she does, the rest of the brothers collapse one by one, like puppets with their strings cut. Because they all became vampire lords at the same time, their lives are intertwined. If one falls, the others fall with him. Soha watches as their bodies crumble before her, but she does not stop. One by one, she bites them all, ensuring that none remain. The only one left, if only for a short while, is Sunkun. With tears in his eyes, he smiles sadly, finally understanding that this is how things were meant to be. I am who I am because of you, he tells her, so it's only natural that I return to you. His final request is simple: bite me. Soha obliges, and as her fangs pierce his skin, Sunkun disappears into dust. The boys awaken in the afterlife, trapped in a realm that is neither heaven nor hell, but a painful in-between. In the real world, while Soha goes around lectureless, awaiting for the new school semester to start, she runs into another girl. This girl is also surprised to find Soha, saying how she is the one who took her place. The other girl, revealed to be Selene, unlike her previous appearance when she was kind and considerate, now displays a malicious grin on her face. A couple of months pass, and spring has sprung. Can't believe I said this, oh my god. Back in the afterlife, we found out that the piece that initially was being showcased was nothing but a mere illusion. The boys are forced to relieve their cravings, experiencing a world where blood is like sweet venom, irresistible yet damning. Every time one of them succumbs to the temptation, their world shatters and resets, trapping them in an eternal cycle of suffering. And in this endless torment, they are forced to ask themselves if they are monsters or if there is still humanity inside of them. For the sake of love, they make their choice. They reject their craving, and with that, they are granted a second chance. Having proven that they can overcome their nature, the brothers are allowed to return to Earth, this time as mortal humans. Upon awakening, they reunite with each other, this time as true brothers, unchained from their past. As they prepare to journey back to Riverfield, Soha finds them on the road. The reunion is overwhelming and emotional. They are finally back together just like old times. To express their love for her, they dedicate a song to Soha, Orange Flower, a symbol of their bond, a symbol of completeness. That night, they gather around a campfire, lying in the grass and admiring the starlit sky. For the first time in a long while, everything feels right again. But peace never lasts forever. As the night deepens, Suno is awakened by a voice, a whisper guiding him towards an abandoned house. From outside, he finds Soha, or at least someone who looks like her, trapped inside the abandoned house. She is crying, her body shaking with fear as she desperately warns him. But it's too late. As Suno turns around, he comes face to face with the real threat, Selene. She watches him with a twisted grin, her eyes gleaming with a deranged hunger. The next scene is chaos. The abandoned house is now engulfed in flames, burning everything in its path. Inside the burning house, Selene traps Suno, preventing him from escaping. With a strong grip, she holds him in place, forcing him to watch the inferno consume everything. Suno, filled with desperation and horror, struggles in vain. And then, Selene leans in, her fangs sinking into his neck. Outside the burning house, the rest of the boys stand frozen, watching the house burn. They know Suno and Soha are inside, but they don't understand what exactly happened. They know they are in danger, but now that they are mere mortals, they are utterly hopeless. For the first time, they have no power to save the ones they love. And with this, we have reached the end of Dark Moon, at least for now. Since there is planned promotion for both Enhypen and andteam, I'm assuming one of them has to be a possible new comeback this year, in which I'm assuming it's also going to be associated with both Two Moons and The Witch of Yarasa, since both of those will most likely be continuations of their next comebacks. So hopefully the next comebacks we're going to see will be directly linked to Two Moons and Witch of Yarasa respectively. I do think the reason why we have received so far flashback comebacks, as I like to call them, is because The Witch of Yarasa and Two Moons were still in development at the time of Romance Untold and Yukakari. So I do believe that by this point, the development of both Two Moons and Witch of Yarasa are complete, so we should get them this year. If we don't, and by any chance we're going to get other flashback comebacks, I do hope they're going to expand more on the lore of Dark Moon and, present it in a way that makes all the characters matter and make all of them relevant. At the end of the day, they have all struggled and did their best to debut, and we all need to show to these people respect and especially support during hard times. It's not easy to be an idol, and we should remember this every single day when it comes to interacting with these idols, be it by social media or face-to-face interactions with them. So I hope you enjoyed this short series. Part 1 is available on YouTube already. The link to it will be available in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm going to take a break for a while, but I'll come back in around a month or so to talk about ILAND, how ILAND is the root of Dark Moon, Enhypen, and andteam, and how a reality show like ILAND can be a perfect example for how future reality shows can make sure to not repeat the mistakes ILAND did when it comes to the idols and trainees that are featured into the reality show program. So I hope you look forward to that, and I'll see you guys in the next video.